Hello everyone and welcome to part 17 of the React series. Today's topic is React portals. In this video, we will learn how to implement Tooltip with the help of portals and position it dynamically using the use state hook. Basically, React portal allow us to render children component out of the parent DOM hierarchy. This is an advanced topic and I will use portals in my existing React application that I am creating along. I will cover these topics in my video, so keep watching till the end and also hit subscribe button if you are new so you don't miss out on any part of this tutorial. Let's get started. Tooltip is a text box that is used for a hint on a web page that appears when hovering over an element or component. Usually, we use CSS property Z in text to lay it at the top. But React works in a component hierarchy where it maintains the parent-child relationship in the DOM tree structure, so you have to track component hierarchy. So before going further, we need to understand DOM because we will work with the React DOM library. DOM stands for Document Object Model, which is a model of HTML structure in a node tree that represents the entire UI of a web page. Whenever we use state and update data in our React application, DOM also updates and represents that data in the UI. We also call it a tree data structure, and every element we add is a node in the DOM tree. In React, when you add the component, it will add as a node in the DOM tree that render on the screen, and the structure where the component appears within another component is called component hierarchy. In this section, we will not work with the root DOM, but outside of it. So now let me introduce React portals and its use case. In React, every element or component comes under the one root element, but in some certain situation, especially for overlay layout, we want to add another node element in DOM tree structure. And here comes React portal. It allows us to render the child component outside of the default tree structure. The child component will not be limited to the parent DOM node and will align the DOM tree while avoiding overflow. It enables the rendering of modal, tooltip, and floating elements like notification bell outside of the main component tree and display them without interfering with the rest of the page layout. So now I am going to implement Tooltip in React portals. The first step we are going to follow is to add the portal DOM node where the tooltip is going to render outside of React root DOM. If you go into the public folder, there into the index.html file, you will find the div id with root which hold the entire application. We will declare our own DOM node overlay root next to root id that will be placed directly nested to the body. So now I am going to add new div element with id overlay root. Now if you peek into dev tool, there are now two DOM trees that exist. The root DOM where every component is nested inside here, and the one we declare the portal DOM node where we are going to place the tooltip component. In the second step, we will call create portal method, which is a DOM specific method imported from the React DOM library. First, we are going to create a new file for our component tooltip, tooltip.js. Let me close this. Next, we will define our component as arrow function, use the const keyword followed by the component name and export it as default. Next, call create portal method which exists inside React DOM library. So we need to import this from that library. So at the top, import in the curly braces create portal method from React DOM. And in the curly braces, specify the React statement, and inside the return statement, I will use empty tag and use curly braces to embed create portal function. Always use curly braces if you are embedding JavaScript expression in JSX. So here, create portal function. Create portal method accept two arguments. JSX element, which is tooltip, that is append to the body of the page outside the main React root element, and the container element we want to render it in with is place of doc, which is overlay root that we defined earlier. We will build simple tooltip in React. I want it when the button hovers, tooltip should appear. Declare parent div element here, and inside this parent div element, we will declare another div with class name tooltip label. In the content, click this button. And as a second argument, we will use DOM element, document dot get element by id to get access the overlay root where we want to render this JSX. After comma, here write document dot get element by id, and the id is overlay root. This ensures that our tooltip appears on top of other element and is not affected by the parent element with overflow hidden set. In order to accomplish the desired outcome, we will now apply the style. To do this, we will create a tooltip style object inside the tooltip function. Const style object tooltip style. We will first style the tooltip with the background color black, border radius of 6 pixels to give it a rounded shape, color of white, shorthand property font which contain font weight 700, size 1 rem, and font family sans serif. Next, we will position it absolutely using position. On the parent div element, we will specify the style attribute, and inside this style attribute, we will pass the object tooltip style. Moving on to the next step, we will import this tooltip component into the my component to use tooltip with a button. So here, import tooltip at the top and add tooltip element below the button. When you go to the browser, okay, we did not add the padding, so here I am going to also add the padding 1 rem. So here we are. It appear on the screen. We will go further and apply logic, so it should only appear when I hover the button, and I also will work onto the position it below the button here. In the next step, we need to use state hook with false initial value, so it should disappear on the screen. Because tooltip component imported into my component, so we have to lift the state up and declare the state variable in this my component. I will close this. So first we need to import use state hook, import use state, and declare the state variable inside my component function with const square bracket, and inside this first state variable tooltip and set tooltip, and here use state initial value false. Now I will use AND operator, which is denoted by 2 ampersand inside JSX. Embed the container. So here use curly braces and state variable tooltip and conditional operator. So if I save it and go to the browser, it disappears because the value is false. In order to control when the tooltip appears or disappears, we must first listen for mouse events. Create the function handle mouse on inside the function component using the const handle mouse on and pass the set tooltip function with argument true. Create another function handle mouse off with using the call handle mouse out and pass the set tooltip function with the argument false. To the button element, here button, declare mouse event on mouse enter with event handle mouse on and mouse event on mouse leave. Handler function handle mouse out. So if the mouse arrow enter the button region, we will update the function and listen for the on mouse enter event. Otherwise, the on mouse leave event will be triggered when the pointer leaves the button area. So it appears and disappears. But when we hover the button element, the button is not on the right position. When we break down the component hierarchy, we must calculate the tooltip position relative to the button element so that it appears in the correct location on the screen. It is good idea to use ref to calculate the position, but I did not introduce use ref yet, so we will use state hook store reference the DOM node of the button element in a state variable. So here I will declare another state for position. So node position and function set node position and initial value is going to null. The next step, we are going to pass the position of the button from the parent component to the tooltip component. For that, we will declare props on the tooltip element. I will give it a name target. In the curly braces, pass the state variable node position. And how we are going to work with it? Inside handle mouse on, we will call set node position inside the handle mouse on function set node position and pass the argument e.target and also pass event here. So when the set node position function trigger inside the handle mouse on, we will get the current value of the button's top and left property, and when the mouse leave the button region, we will reset the position to null. So handle mouse out, call the set node position function and pass argument null. The final step is going to set the top and left position dynamically within the style. So go to the tooltip component and here pass the props target, and first we will check if the target element exists, and if it does, we will set top and left properties of an element to position it just below. So let's specify the tooltip style object top property, and within the backtick followed by $sign and curly braces, we will specify the sum of target offset top with target offset height. Make sure provide the pixel here, and in the next line set the style object tooltip with left property within backtick sum of the target offset left with target half of the offset width, and make sure specify the pixel here. In the third line, we will specify the transform, the tooltip object transform translate x, and value is going to -50%. This will center the element horizontally with the target element. Offset top and offset left properties return the distance between the button element and its offset parent's top and left edges. So let's go to the browser after saving it, and here if I hover the button, we successfully calculate the position. You can also create a little arrow above the tooltip, but we have to use pseudo element for it, and to apply pseudo element you need to create another file called tooltip.css because you can't apply pseudo element code in inline style. So here I will create another file tooltip.css. So here I am going to create the little arrow. For this I will copy this class tooltip label from here to here, and pseudo element before. First is going to content, and after that I will position it absolute. Left is going to 50% and bottom is going to 100%. Next we will specify the margin left property with -5 pixel. Now we will apply the border to create the arrow. Border left 5 pixel, style solid, transparent, and border right is going to same 5 pixel, solid, transparent, and we will specify last border bottom and it's going to 5 pixel, solid, and black. Import this file into tooltip.css. Here import the file name tooltip.css. Now if I save it and go to the browser and hover the button and this. So we successfully created the tooltip and also add the little arrow above it and it is much better. And the last topic I want to cover why React Portal is important for overlay UI structure. Let me give you my point of view. It is not a good idea to include an overlay component within component hierarchy structure. An overlay is like an extra layer on top of the component. When you work with overlay component like modal or tooltip, you will face difficulties in setting up proper Z indexing or it will be challenging to position element properly on the page. If modal or tooltip not displayed on the top of the other component, you can have the problem with accessibility, and if the parent component re-render frequently, it will lead to performing issue. This is why React introduces portals which allow us to render element outside of the component hierarchy without breaking the parent-child relationship. So now if I open the tab tool, here it is to node element, and if I hover the element, you will see the component render inside the overlay root element. Like if you have overlay structure like tooltip, modal, dropdown or other overlay elements, try using React portals in your project and share your experience in the comment below. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and I will see you in the next one.